Howdy everyone, welcome to episode 2. Where we left off was the end of chapter 7 of Genesis. God had just destroyed all the animals and other beings of the earth, except for Noah and all those that were on the boat with him. And the water had covered the earth for 150 days. So now we're going to move on to chapter 8. God didn't forget about Noah and all the animals in the boat. He sent a wind to blow across the waters, and the floods began to disappear, for the subterranean water sources ceased their gushing, and the torrential rains subsided. So the flood gradually receded until 150 days after it began, the boat came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. 3 months later, as the waters continued to go down, other mountain peaks appeared. After another 40 days, Noah opened a porthole and released a raven that flew back and forth until the earth was dry. Meanwhile, he sent out a dove to see if it could find dry ground, but the dove found no place to light and returned to Noah, for the water was still too high. So Noah held out his hand and drew the dove back into the boat. 7 days later, Noah released the dove again, and this time, towards evening, the bird returned to him with an olive leaf in her beak. So Noah knew that the water was almost gone. A week later, he released the dove again, and this time she didn't come back. 29 days after that, Noah opened the door to look, and the water was gone. 8 more weeks went by. Then at last the earth was dry. Then God told Noah, "You may all go out. Release all the animals, birds, and reptiles, so that they will breed abundantly and reproduce in great numbers." So the boat was soon empty. Noah, his wife, and his sons and their wives all disembarked. Along with all the animals, reptiles, and birds, all left the ark in pairs and groups. Then Noah built an altar and sacrificed on it some of the animals and birds God had designated for that purpose. And Jehovah was pleased with the sacrifice and said to himself, "I will never do it again. I will never again curse the earth, destroying all living things, even though man's bent is always toward evil from his earliest youth, and even though he does such wicked things. As long as the earth remains, there will be springtime and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night." God blessed Noah and his sons and told them to have many children and to repopulate the earth. "All wild animals and birds and fish will be afraid of you," God told him, "for I have placed them in your power, and they are yours to use for food, in addition to grain and vegetables. But never eat animals unless their life blood has been drained off, and murder is forbidden. Man killing animals must die, and any man who murders shall be killed. For to kill a man is to kill one made like God. Yes, have many children and repopulate the earth and subdue it." Then God told Noah and his sons, "I solemnly promise you and your children, and the animals you brought with you, all these birds and cattle and wild animals, that I will never again send another flood to destroy the earth. And I seal this promise with this sign. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds as a sign of my promise until the end of time, to you and to all the earth. When I send clouds over the earth, the rainbow will be seen in the clouds, and I will remember my promise to you and to every being, that never again will the floods come and destroy all life. For I will see the rainbow in the cloud and remember my eternal promise to every living being on this earth." The names of Noah's 3 sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is the ancestor of the Canaanites. From these 3 sons of Noah came all the nations of the earth. Noah became a farmer and planted a vineyard, and he made wine. One day, as he was drunk and lay naked in his tent, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and went outside and told his 2 brothers. Then Shem and Japheth took a robe and held it over their shoulders, and, walking backwards into the tent, let it fall across their father to cover his nakedness as they looked the other way. When Noah awoke from his drunken stupor and learned what had happened and what Ham, his younger son, had done, he cursed Ham's descendants. A curse upon the Canaanites, he swore. May they be the lowest of slaves to the descendants of Shem and Japheth. Then he said, God bless Shem, and may Canaan be his slave. God bless Japheth, and let them share the prosperity of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. Noah lived another 350 years after the flood and was 950 years old at his death. These are the families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who were the three sons of Noah, for sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, Dodanim. Their descendants became the maritime nations in various lands, each with a separate language. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteka. The sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. One of the descendants of Cush was Nimrod, who became the first of the kings. He was a mighty hunter, blessed of God, and his name became proverbial. People would speak of someone as being like Nimrod, a mighty hunter, blessed of God. The heart of his empire included Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From there he extended his reign to Assyria. He built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Resen, which is located between Nineveh and Calah, the main city of the empire. Mizraim was the ancestor of the people inhabiting these areas: Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrusim, Kasluhim, from whom came the Philistines, and Caphtorim. Canaan's oldest son was Sidon, and he was also the father of Heth. From Canaan descended these nations: the Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, Hamathites. Eventually, the descendants of Canaan spread from Sidon all the way to Gerar in the Gaza Strip, and to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim near Lasha. These, then, were the descendants of Ham, spread abroad in many lands and nations with many languages. Eber descended from Shem, the oldest brother of Japheth. Here is a list of Shem's other descendants: Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, Aram. Aram's sons were Uz, Hul, Gether, Mash. Arpachshad's son was Shelah, and Shelah's son was Eber. Two sons were born to Eber: Peleg, meaning division, for during his lifetime the people of the world were separated and dispersed, and Joktan, Peleg's brother. Joktan was the father of Almodad, Shelef, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jabal. These descendants of Joktan lived all the way from Mesha to the eastern hills of Sephar. These, then, were the descendants of Shem, classified according to their political groupings, languages, and geographical locations. All of the men listed above are descended from Noah through many generations, living in the various nations that developed after the flood. that time all mankind spoke a single language. As the population grew and spread eastward, a plain was discovered in the land of Babylon, and was soon thickly populated. The people who lived there began to talk about building a great city, with a temple tower reaching to the skies, a proud, eternal monument to themselves. This will weld us together, they said, and keep us from scattering all over the world. So they made great piles of hard-burned brick and collected bitumen to use as mortar. I have no idea what that is or if I'm pronouncing it right. Bitumen, that is. I know what mortar is. But when God came down to see the city and the tower mankind was making, he said, "Look, if they are able to accomplish all this when they have just begun to exploit their linguistic and political unity, just think of what they will do later. Nothing will be unattainable for them. Come, let us go down and give them different languages so that they won't understand each other's words." So, in that way, God scattered them all over the earth, and that ended the building of the city. That is why the city was called Babel, meaning confusion, because it was there that Jehovah confused them by giving them many languages, thus widely scattering them across the face of the earth. That's actually where the name Tower of Babel comes from, because in the Bible they don't really call it the Tower of Babel, not in Genesis. We'll get to that later. But yeah, the name of Babylon in its original language, as well as Arabic currently, is Babel or Babil, depending on what dialect, of course, and if you're a native speaker or not. I, of course, am not. Shem's line of descendants included Arpachshad, born 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old. After that he lived another 500 years and had many sons and daughters. When Arpachshad was 35 years old, his son Shelah was born, and after that he lived another 403 years and had many sons and daughters. Shelah was 30 years old when his son Eber was born, living 403 years after that, and had many sons and daughters. Eber was 34 years old when his son Peleg was born. He lived another 430 years afterwards, and had many sons and daughters. Peleg was 30 years old when his son Reu was born, and lived another 209 years afterwards, and had many sons and daughters. Reu was 32 years old when Serug was born. He lived 207 years after that, with many sons and daughters. Serug was 30 years old when his son Nahor was born. He lived 200 years afterwards, with many sons and daughters. Nahor was 29 years old at the birth of his son Terah. He lived 119 years afterwards and had sons and daughters. By the time Terah was 20 years old, he had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran had a son named Lot. A lot of people pronounce it Lot, because in English we call it lot, as in like a parking lot or a lot of people, but it's actually Lot, because it comes from the original Hebrew, I believe. Where was I? All this lore gets me distracted. But Haran died young in the land where he was born, in Ur of the Chaldeans, and was survived by his father. Meanwhile, Abram married his half-sister Sarai, while his brother Nahor married their orphan niece Milcah, who was the daughter of their brother Haran, and she had a sister named Iscah. Iscah? We'll go with Iscah. But Sarai was barren, she had no children. Then Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, his son Haran's child, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and left Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But they stopped instead at the city of Haran and settled there. And there Terah died at the age of 205. helmet gets heavy. You wear it for a while. After the death of Abram's father, God told him, "Leave your own country behind you, and your own people, and go to the land I will guide you to. If you do, I will cause you to become the father of a great nation. I will bless you and make your name famous, and you will be a blessing to many others. And I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and the entire world will be blessed because of you." It's prophetic. It really is. Because, well, you'll see who Abram later comes to be known as, if you haven't already figured it out. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed him, and Lot went too. Abram was 75 years old at that time. He took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, the cattle and slaves he had gotten in Haran, and finally arrived in Canaan. Traveling through Canaan, they came to a place near Shechem and set up camp beside the oak at Moreh. This area was inhabited by the Canaanites at that time. Then Jehovah appeared to Abram and said, "I am going to give this land to your descendants." And Abram built an altar there to commemorate Jehovah's visit. Afterwards, Abram left that place and traveled southward to the hilly country between Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he made camp and made an altar to the Lord and prayed to him. Thus he continued slowly southward to the Negeb, pausing frequently. There was at this time a terrible famine in the land, and so Abram went on down to Egypt to live. But as he was approaching the borders of Egypt, he asked Sarai, his wife, to tell everyone that she was his sister. "You are very beautiful," he told her, "and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'That is his wife. Let's kill him, and then we can have her.' But if you say you are my sister, then the Egyptians will treat me well because of you, and spare my life." I mean, look, guys, just don't do it. Just don't do stuff like this, okay? Just don't do it. God. Where are we? And sure enough, when they arrived in Egypt, everyone spoke of her beauty. When the palace aides saw her, they praised her to their king, the Pharaoh, and she was taken into his harem. Then Pharaoh gave Abram many gifts because of her: sheep, oxen, donkeys, men and women slaves, and camels. But the Lord sent a terrible plague upon Pharaoh's household on account of her being there. Then Pharaoh called Abram before him and accused him sharply. "What is this you have done to me?" he demanded. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why were you willing to let me marry her, saying she was your sister? Here, take her and be gone." And Pharaoh sent him out of the country under armed escort, Abram, his wife, and all his household and possessions. Actually, oh no, that comes later. Sorry. I thought they skipped a part, but it comes later. I've read this before, like in English and German. So. But yeah, like. I still don't get why God punished Pharaoh. You know, Abram lied to him. So did Sarai. And yet Pharaoh was punished. It's not right, you know. So they left Egypt and traveled north into the Negeb, Abram with his wife and Lot and all that they owned, for Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. Then they continued northward toward Bethel, where he had camped before, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had built the altar. And there he again worshipped the Lord. Lot too was very wealthy, with sheep and cattle and many servants. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot with all their flocks and herds. There were too many animals for the available pasture. So fights broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot, despite the danger they all faced from the tribes of Canaanites and Perizzites present in the land. Then Abram talked it over with Lot. This fighting between our men has got to stop, he said. We can't afford to let a rift develop between our clans. Close relatives such as we close relatives such as we are must must present a united front. I'll tell you what we'll do. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want that part over there to the east, then I'll stay here in the western section. Or if you want to be the west, then I'll go over there to the east. Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan River, well watered everywhere. This was before Jehovah destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Wow, I didn't even have to spoil it for you. It really has spoilers right in it. Okay, let's keep reading, guys. The whole section was like the Garden of Eden, or like the beautiful countryside around Zoar in Egypt. So that is what Lot chose. Oh, sorry about that. Where was I? He went there with his flocks and servants, and thus he and Abram parted company. For Abram stayed in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain, settling at a place near the city of Sodom. The men of this area were unusually wicked and sinned greatly against Jehovah. After Lot was gone, the Lord said to Abram, Look as far as you can see in every direction, for I am going to give it all to you and your descendants. And I am going to give you so many descendants that, like dust, they can't be counted. Hike in all directions and explore the new possessions I am giving you. Then Abram moved his tent to the oaks of Mamre near Hebron and built an altar to Jehovah there. One more chapter, guys, and I think we're done. We'll have read the same amount as last time. Now war filled the land. Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. They fought against Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, later called Zoar. These kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela mobilized their armies in Siddim Valley, that is, the valley of the Salt Sea. For 12 years they had all been subject to King Chedorlaomer, but now in the 13th year they rebelled. People can only deal with a lousy leader for so long, you know. Sometimes it's unwarranted, but sometimes it is. 1 year later, Chedorlaomer and his allies arrived and the slaughter began, for they were victorious over the following tribes at the places indicated: the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim and Ham, the Emim in the plain of Kiriathaim. These are some insane names. the Horites in Mount Seir, as far as El Paran at the edge of the desert. Then they swung around to En-Mishpat, later called Kadesh, and destroyed the Amalekites and also the Amorites living in Hazazon Tamar. But now the other army, that of the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, unsuccessfully attacked Chedorlaomer and his allies as they were in the Salt Sea Valley. 4 kings against 5. As it happened, the valley was full of asphalt pits, and as the army of the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some slipped into the pits, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then the victors plundered Sodom and Gomorrah and carried off all their wealth and food, and went on their homeward way, taking with them Lot, Abram's nephew, who lived in Sodom, and all he owned. One of the men who escaped came and told Abram of the Hebrew, who was camping among the oaks belonging to Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner, Abram's allies. When Abram learned that Lot had been captured, he called together the men born into his household, 318 of them in all, and chased after the retiring army as far as dawn. That night he successfully attacked them and pursued the fleeing army to Hobah, north of Damascus, and recovered everything: the loot that had been taken, his relative Lot, and all of Lot's possessions, including the women and other captives. As Abram returned from his strike against Chedorlaomer and the other kings at the valley of Shaveh, later called King's Valley, the king of Sodom came out to meet him, and Melchizedek, the king of Salem, or Jerusalem, who was a priest of the God of highest heaven, brought him bread and wine. Then Melchizedek blessed Abram with this blessing: "The blessing of the supreme God, creator of heaven and earth, be upon you, Abram, and blessed be God who has delivered your enemies over you." Then Abram gave Melchizedek 1/10 of all the spoils. That's a lot. It's quite a bit, guys. The king of Sodom told him, "Just give me back my people who were captured. Keep for yourself the booty stolen from my city." But Abram replied, "I have solemnly promised Jehovah, the supreme God, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread from you, lest you say, 'Abram is rich because of what I gave him.' All I'll accept is what these young men of mine have eaten, but give a share of the booty to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, my allies." That's it, guys. That's it for today. Next time, we'll start with chapter 15 of Genesis. See y'all later.